I am so pleased to have a chance to kick off this conference today with a panel on the compacting process, which is something that has come up a lot in discussions of our committee. The theme of this year's conference, as you may know, is for our grandchildren's wisdom. And because of that, there were many, many discussions and questions about what it would look like to assure the future of Indigenous education in Alaska and more broadly. And because of that, the question of compacting, this big looming process by which tribes are reclaiming sovereignty over education in this state, the questions around that process really came up many times, and we thought it would be meet to really bring together a panel where people could talk about this process, its hopes, its ambitions, its challenges, and also to have a chance for all our distinguished guests to be able to think with us and to ask questions and propose ideas. And this is actually just the first of at least 2 events at this conference that are addressing the question of compacting. So if you're interested in this topic, we hope that you'll spend some time with it over the course of the next few days. So I'm going to turn this panel over really quickly to my opposite and my colleague, my dear, dear colleague, Yak Duche, who is the Tlingit language coordinator, facilitator at Ketchikan Indian at KIC, and who does just amazing work with language revitalization, language instruction, and with community organizing. She's just been an absolutely treasured member of the committee. But before I do that, I'm just going to introduce our 3 panelists who have all played, who are all playing an important role in the conversation and in the action around compacting. So our first panelist is going to be Chukungi Tla Misha Jackson, who is the I'm just looking here at the
boss.
Yeah, the boss. At the bio that she sent me 2 minutes ago. She is the tribal education liaison for Tlingit and Haida, and she is a passionate Tlingit educator. She's Shungu KD from House Lord from the Sun. And she has been working on culture-based learning and curricula and community engagement and tribal sovereignty through education for many, many years. She has degrees from UC Santa Cruz, Temple University, and the University of Alaska Southeast. And she has just done incredible work all across Southeast Alaska and in Juneau, and has been just raising an amazing family with some darling daughters who always come up to me with a little bit of money at Kuis, for which I'm very grateful. And then our next speaker will be Paul Berg, who also has a long and storied career in education, particularly in Indigenous communities, having started his work at Pine Ridge Reservation and subsequently having come up to Alaska and worked on the formation of the Aleut School District, and also having worked at the behest of Bill Demmert on the creation of a multicultural studies course for Alaska school teachers, and he works now for Douglas Indian Association, doing a lot of educational policy planning. And then finally, I'm delighted to have with us today Sonia Scan Ha Tuch, who is the also just switching text messages here. The other boss, who is another really big, amazing, who's a really big boss, who is director of the Education and Training Department at KIC, and is just a distinguished community leader and educator in Ketchikan, has been there for many decades, doing very important work, and is really spearheading compacting in that community. So, wasa gunuschishuan shawudaneki thank you so much for being here. We're really, really happy to have you here. Yak Duche, I'm going to turn it over to you to set us up for this panel. Okay.
Before we let our panel share their experiences and work in state tribal education compacting, I wanted to lay a little groundwork and share with you a little bit about what STEC, State Tribal Education Compacting, is. So of course I wanted to share pictures of our beautiful presenters, Ms. Misha Jackson, Sonia Scan, and Paul Berg. So what is compacting? So it is a process and it is an agreement between the state of Alaska and a native tribal entity that allows the tribe to oversee K through 12 education in their home community. This gives the ability to have a say and have a voice in our children's education, how they learn, what they learn, and so forth. And so this is a really big need in the state of Alaska. All over, we're a home to many, many different diverse cultures that are very particular to our people. And so this State Tribal Education Compact is a step in that direction. As a timeline for STEC, in 2016, there was Commissioner Michael Johnson. He recognized the need for the education reform and made changes to DEED's missions and values. Following that, in 2017, Alaska's Education Challenge was launched. Like 100 residents from all over the state collaborated to create recommendations to Alaska's State Board. And then in 2019, AFN, Alaska's Federation of Natives, Commissioner Johnson and Governor Dunleavy announced their support for state tribal education compacting, which of course 2 years later, DEED announced a $1 million grant at AFN that year. And that work had happened in between those years. That grant had actually ended in June of 2024 with a state legislative report. But I think one of the questions that is big is the potential challenges to promote the success from here. What does that next step look like? For more information on the State Tribal Education Compacting State Legislative Report, there is a QR code here you're welcome to scan that would take you to that report. Gyneth Chish, Haua, Ndoikshin, Gyneth Chish, Isa Ahi. Again, very brief. I don't want to take up too much time from the panelists, so Gyneth Chish, Skiodisa, Kuha.
Does this just stay up? We'll let that stay up. Okay. I'll tell a quick funny, well, I've always got funny stories, if you couldn't tell. I'm surprised I didn't hear any groans when you found out I was Shungu Katie. Now, when you find out who my mom is, that's usually where it comes in. So my mother's Carmen Quinto Plunkett. Yeah, there we go. It's okay, like I embrace it. Hi, Mom. So, love you. But definitely she is the reason I'm here, right? Just as we all are here. It's our ancestors, it's our mothers, it's our aunties, our uncles, our grandparents, everybody that's done the work before us. And that was the journey that I basically was on that led me here. When we entered into those doors, we knew, and we said often, we stand on the shoulders of giants. This idea wasn't just from 2016. You can see this idea just circulating way before that happens. It just, the time has come. And so I'm up here in front of you. I appreciate the invitation to be here and to share a little bit about the experience, and just want to let you know that, you know, that's 85 pages of work that we're going to drill down into about 30, 40 minutes. So I highly recommend you take a look at this, read it front to back. I'll grade your assignment afterwards. But it was a lot of work. It was many, many hours. There were many conversations in that room. There were many more conversations that were happening outside that room. And they were empowering. They were challenging. They were difficult. They were emotional. They were funny. But it was everything that it was supposed to be at that moment in time. So I do have to give a shout out to Joel Isaac, who worked for DEED and helped lead us through that negotiation process, if we can call it that. But it really was just a collaborative discussion of governmental entities. So you could imagine how that went from passionate educators to state administrators to language speakers to elders, and then our friendly legal folks. I was like, I saw like SIG come off a plane. I can't see if there's any of our tribal lawyers out there, but shout out, you guys know who you are. So it was a huge undertaking by all of us. It was a lot of learning more than anything else. And so to bring life to what these 85 pages are, you really have to look at this like that journey, right? And so I stepped in the moment that Tlingit and Haida opened up a position for a tribal education compact liaison, and I applied for it. I was working at UAS. I was in the secondary education teacher training. I'd been a teacher, and my roots here in Southeast actually started as the JOM. So I'm not going to say I started at the bottom, because JOM, I started at the top. I started with tribal sovereignty. I started hands-on, working with the kids every single day, and moved from there to working as a teacher, being in front of the classroom, learning the system's ins and outs. And I had just come off of the Indigenous Educational Leadership Certificate at K-State with Dr. Alex Redcorn, and I was fired up and ready to go. So I was glad I found Sonia as a counterpart, Mark up north, Carl, Maddie, all those folks. I just want to be sure we speak some of those names into this room too, because it may just be us, but there was so many more wonderful people that were a part of it. So as the boss mentioned, I am a daughter, but I'm a mother of 3 Thunderbirds. And all 3 of my children, we walk the walk and we talk the talk. My children are enrolled in the Tlingit Culture, Language, and Literacy program. I have the option as a parent to enroll my child in a Tlingit Culture and Language program, and I take that opportunity. My youngest child was part of the Tlingit Language Immersion Nest for just a year, and the stark difference I saw between the 2 of them and how my littlest in 3 days a week over about 6 months could start thinking in Tlingit. That's what I brought to the table, and that's what Tlingit and Haida brought to the table. So we took that, and we basically walked in and we said, okay, how much money is this for? We want it with no strings attached. Put 2 signatures at the bottom, let's sign it, and then let's get going. Obviously, Deed didn't go for that. We ended up with 85 pages. But no, that was our intent, full tribal sovereignty and autonomy over education. And basically, it was a learning process. We went through and we shared frustrations, we shared passions, and we really looked at what this system could look like, because in the end, that's what we inherited. We've inherited all of these systems put on our clans. Tribes are a system put on clans, right? Angsa Corps, system. State, system. Before that, it was a territory. Federal government, right? We've got all these systems. The mechanism for education in the United States is a system through the states, okay? That is the power dynamic. And we can go to Congress, we can ask for change. We should not stop here at compacting. This is a baby step, right? We will not stop, and I guarantee you that. So if anybody out there wants to keep going, you know who to call, and I will be right next to you, because this isn't it for me. Right? This is just a small part of where our voice has been able to be heard for the first time in the history of Alaska Native education. So if you look, I do a lot of research and reading. I picked up one from the McDowell Group probably in the 90s, 2000s. That was kind of like a lit review of Alaska Native education. Did you know in their 4 to 6 page opening history, and great stuff. I've always enjoyed the stuff from McDowell Group. But that 4 to 6 pages at the very beginning, do you know that tribes are not mentioned once? And I want you to think about this. When you think about the history of Alaska Native education, tribes are never, ever mentioned in Alaska. You get the BIA, the BIE, the federal government, the state, charter schools, etc. Nobody has ever allowed tribes and clans to enter this conversation. And there is actually probably nothing stopping a clan from starting a private school. That's my dream and aspiration, so let's go after that. But for now, this is the vehicle and the mechanisms that we worked out with Deed to try and get us there. And so we came in, and Tlingit and Haida, we had our experience in early ed, and Sonia's got all of her wonderful experience she'll share. Everybody had something else to contribute, and we basically morphed this into, we tried to create a legally binding document that we can enter into with the state that allows our communities and our tribes to have sovereignty over education and how they see fit. There are some levers, right? As Joel was always telling us, there's levers and mechanisms and cogs in the wheel, whatever you want to say. But in the end, we were looking from the perspective of our rural villages. We were looking from the perspective of our small village councils. We were looking from the perspective of our councils that are inside big urban states, into big urban cities, right? And we were trying to find ways that we could legally work with the language so that everybody who wanted to take up the option to enter compacting eventually could make this into an education system they could be proud of, right? And so there are some things that we didn't get to negotiate very well, and those are just things that we are just not gonna give up on. But we did get wins. And I think that was probably the most exciting part. And to be honest, the level of support we heard from DEED was refreshing. I didn't know if it was a negotiation strategy, to be totally honest. It kind of like threw me off a bit, but we went in there guns a-blazing about teacher certification and tribal teacher certification, and they were just like, yeah, we think you guys should have full autonomy over tribal teacher certification. We're even gonna make sure that there's a mechanism in place. We're calling it a TC, and you guys are in charge of what that looks like, and you pass your names along to us. Signed, sealed, delivered, right? Because the teachers are that lifeblood of a school, right? They are the ones that do all the work. Thank you. Yes, that's not loud enough. I was a teacher. I know there's teachers in here, right? And they learn from our aunties and uncles, and it's our communities and our family members. So we designed something where we could see our sisters, our brothers, our children, a pathway to becoming a teacher in a tribal school. There is nothing more powerful to change the face of education than picturing your own children becoming a teacher, okay? That's our education system that existed before colonization, and that's what we're gonna get back. So they're baby steps, but man, these are big steps, okay? So I encourage you to read this all. I think I went over 10 minutes, and the tears are coming, but I will say, Joel, actually, I always won when he gave me a time limit. I usually hit it right on the nose, and I just drop the mic and leave it like that. But I'm always open to questions. I have plenty to say, and we'll have a presentation, my colleague Jasmine James and I, in the afternoon. You can always ask more questions there, but
Hello, I'm Paul Berg, and I'm honored to be up here with these two ladies and warriors, and especially to follow that very precise and challenging presentation about compacting. I'd like to say, first of all, that I'd like to share with you kind of a historical perspective from my vision as a teacher in Alaska for 40 years actually, but a 45-year teaching career and what I have seen. And I'm going to be presenting a little bit of a vision from another country on compacting, if you will. I think compacting has the potential to be one of the most revolutionary changes in Alaskan education in probably 50 years. The potential is there. There are, how it's implemented is going to be the key point, and the battles that are going to be fought over this are tremendous. And as this young lady just mentioned, this was only the first battle. There are other agendas in operation that are going to fight against tribal compacting. I remember 48 years ago when I came up here as a teacher, we disbanded the state-operated school system because it was failing. We set up the REAAs, the Molly Hooch High Schools. Anybody remember those? Okay. The system was failing. We were told, we were promised, there's going to be local control. We're going to set up school boards in these 26 REAAs. Local people, Native people will be controlling their own schools. That isn't what happened. We developed a very different type of education system. I've done work for 7 years out in the YK Delta. Last time I figured out the cost per student in one of the districts was about 6 or 7 years ago, $40,000 per year per student. What were we getting for the result from this? Well, the state, when they initiated compacting, when Governor Walker began, they didn't have much choice. The statistics were horrific. Alaska has one of the highest per capita suicide rates in the nation. Among Yupik and Inupiaq boys, I think it's a hemispheric record from the data I have. It may be a world record, I just don't have the data on Africa and Asia. Alaska Natives by 2013 had the highest male indigenous incarceration rate in the world. On October, about 2013, the FBI designated Alaska as the most dangerous state. For me, it came home really when we received 4 or 5 years ago a call from a friend of mine who was a teacher. 2 o'clock in the morning, this is what she was screaming on the phone. Paul, I just lost my 65th student. I can't take this anymore. I just can't take it. She explains through violence or suicide over her 18 years teaching in the villages, she had lost these students. I have done everything they told me to do for 18 years. They are all wrong. We are doing all the wrong things. What we have in rural Alaska, especially in the YK Delta, along some of the river systems up north, is an allopathic education system. It's producing social pathology, and the data's right there. The statistics are right there. The UN Resolution on the Rights of Indigenous People says indigenous people, Articles 13 and 14, have the right to control their own education, and that is denied in Alaska. Problems I see, and I'd like to, just as a person who's been an educator for almost 50 years, that are being presented and obstacles to achieving these goals. One is gradualism. Last week at a meeting with people at the Department of Education, they talked about a 10-year implementation plan. We don't have 10 years. Kids are dying now. This is for real. Another one is scale. They want to keep it very small scale, giving out grants to small scale units. You have to have large scale implementation to have a permanent program. You have to train, you have to have certification, you have to develop curriculum, you have to develop materials. The system will want to keep it small scale. They'll want to keep agency. They will want to keep choice in the power of the dominant culture. Another will be cost. Setting up various administrative centers we could end up with one building little tiny school districts, and that will not work. There must be large-scale development. These are battles that are going to be fought. I'd like to share one other thing with you in the very short time I have. I am Sami. My grandparents came over from Norway. They were not Nordics, they were Sami. Used to be called Laps. Ever heard of that? Laplanders? Lap, the dirty clothes people. They're not Laps, they're Sami. And the Sami story I'd just like to share with you. They were sent, my grandparents, my cousins, went to boarding schools to be Norwegianized. Very similar program. After the Germans occupied Norway in 1940, they attempted to remake the Norwegian schools. They attempted to bring in anti-Semitic books, Nazis. You Norwegians, you are Aryans. You are part of the Third Reich. The teachers would have none of it. Many teachers, well, teachers were shot. They were a huge struggle, but it was the teachers of Norway who were the core of the resistance movement. They resisted being remade into Nazis and Aryans. My ancestors and my grandparents and my cousins were part of a movement for 30 years after the war, and I'm boiling what happened down in just a few sentences. They said, what the Nazis attempted to do to you, to remake you into Aryans, into part of the greater German Reich, you resisted. But what they were trying to do to you and what you resisted so heroically, you are doing to us. It hit a nerve in Norway. In the 1980s, Norway amended their constitution, which now reads, the agents and employees of the state of Norway are responsible for the perpetuation and continuation of Sami language, culture, and way of life. The Sami have an education system which they control. The Sami have a parliament which they caribou, reindeer rulings over some land, and fishing rights, certain fishing rights. Everything that's passed by the Sami Parliament goes to the Storting, the national parliament. They do not have political sovereignty. They never asked for it. They have cultural sovereignty. Such things are possible in Alaska, and they should be, if we dream big. So I would say, when it comes to compacting, we, all of us, need to dream big and to know that this is a battle that's going to be fought over the next few years. They are on the first, what would you say, the first battle being fought. It's going to go on for a number of years, but we all need to be conscious of it, and we all need to take part in it and support the growth of compacting in Alaska. Thank you.
So I just want to start with the fact that funding is what we all need. We all need money, right? To be able to do the schools, to be able to build them, to be able to reach out to our children, to do those things. Compacting will bring money to the tribes to create their own school districts. It will be a tribally controlled public school. And to me, that's going to be one of the best things about it, is it's tribally controlled public school. Right now, the state has a school board. As an advisor to the school board, they have a military advisor. They have other things like that. They do not have a tribal person that sits on their board, nor do they have a tribal person that sits as an advisor. So as part of compacting, that's one of the things we ask for. Because the important thing is that we should be represented equally along with every other person that is there. And we're not. We're very underrepresented, as usual in those government positions. The reason why we cannot get funding from BIE for education was because of a bill, and in that bill, Senator Stevens, put a rider in that bill that basically says that we cannot receive money for education in the state of Alaska. Our state did write a resolution asking for that to be revoked, but it didn't go anywhere. So they did create a grant then that was the Alaska Native Equity Programming Grant, that's now the Alaska Native Education Grant, and that grant was supposed to go to tribes to help with education. That's not what happens to it right now. And so the hope is that we start focusing and learning where these things come from so that we can get up and talk to people like the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. and say, well, we've been left out, and here's in Alaska. We're left out of all of these different things. You have promised us, as well as the lower 48, you have promised us to educate us, to bring us what we need, and you're not doing it. So they are not fulfilling their trust responsibility to the state of Alaska tribes, period. And that's one of the things that we have to fight for. That's another fight that is going right alongside of the compacting, because no matter what, compacting through the state, we did as good as we can to give us as much control as possible. We worked, 5 tribes worked together, and I think it was amazing because we were able to pull from each other's experience and knowledge, and we were able to bring together this report in a way that reads very smoothly. You can't tell it was 5 different tribes with 5 very different areas and regions and needs. So the report itself is really good. Now, getting it before the Senate this year, because it did not go last year, that's the next hurdle for this one. We still want to continue to work with the feds and with the state on money for education and making sure that we can receive it. Because tribally controlled education, sovereignty in education is what we're looking for. We have KIC, we started a high school 12, I think we're on year 13. We started this year, we have 16 students this year. Every year it kind of changes up and down. But we have a 100% graduation rate. And Peter Stanton, you say hi. He's one of our teachers that was one of our first teachers. Actually, he was tenured with the district through us, so it's very exciting. I stalked his he had a blog page, and I stalked it, and I said, I want to hire him. So I just tell you, he's great, and we're very fortunate to have people like him who have helped us along. But the thing of it is I asked our school district, I said, we've been doing this 10 years. We have a 100% graduation rate. When are you going to ask us what we're doing? And they still don't. But the thing of it is it's like what we're doing is we have relationship. And I think everybody in this room knows that you're not going to learn from anyone if you don't have a relationship with them. Relationship is the strongest thing that will pull us together. And we are a people who need to be brought together. We are used to being a part of a whole, not separate. And so when we come together, Misha's my sister now. Like, her and I just yeah, let's go. And she'd say something, and I'd say, anyway, we had a lot of fun. But those are some of the things that I think are very important to mention, because they're the reason why we're even doing the compacting. And then they're acting like they're doing us a favor to do some of the things that they're actually supposed to be doing according to the Constitution and according to the treaties that were signed. So they're not doing us a favor. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're just finally bringing it out. And I think that's probably one of the most important things to remember. When you walk in a room, you walk in with confidence. And you know this is our right. This is our inherent right to give our kids a good education. And remember, it's all about the kids. If we do this for any other reason other than to give our kids an equal and a good education, then we're doing it for the wrong reasons. We want our kids to grow. We want them to excel and to do well. And I do know that there was, let me just look at my notes, because I just found out 5 minutes ago, or 20 minutes ago that I was speaking. All of the statistics that say that we're unwell, all of the statistics that tell us that we are losing more of our youth to suicide, that we are losing all of these things. We know those statistics. Let's start talking about solutions. So find solution-based ideas and bring them together, and that's how we're going to move forward. We know the deficit base. We know the deficit. That's why we're here, right? That's why we know we're losing our language. We know along with that language, we lose our culture. All of those things go together. So when we do them, we need to remember that we're doing this for the generations to come. It has nothing to do with us. So thank you.
Yuan wasagan chish yi yukatangi ka takayanach yi jinei ya shukakau ya naskwini tin. Thank you so much for your words, and above all for your work, which is so important in Indigenous schools. We have some time for questions, so we have about 20 minutes. I want to try to end this panel at about 10:10, so that we have just a 5-minute break so people can proceed to the next really exciting talks, which are starting at 10:15. And we have, we'll use this mic for the panelists, and then we can run that mic down below to folks in the audience. Turn this guy on. Okay, great. So, Yakdusha is going to run the mic here to folks who have questions. I wonder if we have anyone in the audience who'd like to start us off.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rachel Roy Yakuchsa, and I have served on the parent committee for the Sitka Native Education Program, and I was actually at the gathering where this first idea came up and moved forward as we went through looking at transforming education. It was the butterfly. Once you turn into a butterfly, you can never go back to being anything else. And I think I'm really, really encouraged and excited to hear that it's moving forward, because it was very, very different from what a lot of the other kind of ideas that came out of that. But hearing this update, how can we, as community members or parents, I have a son in middle school, and I have another one that was just born. So I definitely want to see this move forward. How can we support from communities if we're not working directly in education, but peripherally? I work for the Chamber of Commerce, so I do interact. But can you give us some ideas for supporting this mission?
Hello? Oh, this is a heavy mic. Thank you. This is a perfect transition. We did not plant her out there. But that's how you know things are so amazing here in Sitka. Honestly, whatever you can do to help educate other people, right? Because as soon as the word tribe is put out in this state, there's fear, there's animosity, there's competition, there's frustration, there's just all the feels that come with it, and we need more people to learn the ins and outs of this, and to listen and to share and to help us educate, right, at every level, because we do think this isn't just about our tribal students. This is a tribally compacted public school. That means it will be open to all, right? And as everybody has mentioned, like this, we know what works. Give us the opportunity, but we can't get that opportunity until you guys start knocking on the door of all your representatives, from your local school board to your parent committees, to your people in legislature, to Lisa Murkowski, and say, hey, let them know every single time this is what we're looking for, and we still want more, right? Put us on this pathway, open the door, and just watch us go. Like, just with that butterfly, you will be amazed. But we can't get through that door until this is put on the floor in session and codified into law and part of Alaska state statute, okay? So that is heavy lifting work, and we need every possible voice that we can, and it's a quick email, right? It's a quick phone call. It's a quick handshake. It's, if you see Representative Himshoot, hey, have you guys gotten any updates yet on tribal compacting? Where is that at? And then let me know what you find out.
I know, I called Dee. I would have to echo that. I think the more people that we have talking about it and reminding their representatives that we know this is happening, the better off we'll be. I think it's really important. Even I don't think the federal government understands the difference between, and I know they had mentioned it earlier, between tribes and tribal organizations or foundations. And so the important thing for us as tribes is to educate our children, to have the ability to educate our children. Up until now, Alaska has been, well, since the 80s was the last time Alaska got education dollars from the federal government other than competitive grants, which then has made us compete against each other rather than work together, which is, I think, sometimes where people would like to keep us, competing. So it is about working together. It is about supporting one another. If you're my counterpart in any area, I want to teach you everything I know so that you're able to move on. So that when we are doing those things, that everybody has the tools. We need to share our tools with everyone. It isn't a competition. It's something that will save us. Thank you.
Another aspect of this, and one thing I get involved with, is getting information out to the non-Native community, to non-Native teachers, and to non-Native parents in the schools. We are developing materials at Douglas Indian Association, Alaska History Materials, to be used and offered to schools in Southeast and elsewhere, hopefully by next year, that give the more complete history of Alaska that many non-Native people simply are not aware of. They're not aware of the boarding schools or things that happened in the past. So reaching out to non-Native friends, neighbors, and institutions can be very, very helpful.
Can I add one more thing really fast, since Sonia does such a good job of like bringing things full circle? I will, I look young. I am young. I'll say that much. I'll be brutally honest at this point, since I have this. I know this is being recorded. But for those of you guys that have friends and family and relatives and yourselves that work in the tribes, that work at the corporations, that work at the nonprofits, that work at the schools, I'm going to be brutally honest. Quit fighting. Yeah. We know the statistics of children growing up in households where their parents fight. That's what it's been like for me as an educator. I'm still here, and I sure as heck am not stopping, and I'm gonna raise up every kid I've got and every kid that comes across my doors to be a teacher and to be inspired, but I need you guys to quit fighting, okay? And pass that message along. Sheesh. I don't need a mic on this yet. That's right.
Another question from the floor? Oh.
Thank you. I'm from Seattle, and I had read a bit about the boarding schools, and I was flummoxed and appalled when I came up by the museum and I saw two prominent plaques, the same describing the history and the virtues of this boarding school. And it occurs to me that as far as getting the word out to the non-tribal community, a small but non-trivial accomplishment would be to replace those plaques so that the people who come from the tour boats would not only see this beautiful place, but also understand the tragic history and the history which is being remade. That's all.
I would just add, so thank you for that. A lot of our work during the negotiations was wordsmithing and language, right? And so that essentially was our plaque, was what does this look like? What are people going to see when they read this? What are they going to feel when they see these words come off of this paper? And what are they going to visualize when they do read it? Now, granted, it's a pretty dense legal document, but we paid attention to as many of those small, tiny words as we possibly could, as many details, and we probably missed some. And we need more eyes, and this isn't the final version, but you better believe we are absolutely trying to rewrite those plaques in essence. So, Jeesh.
Question in the second row.
Hello, I'm from Juneau, and we have a big school district there. And what can be done in the meantime?
I have plenty. You guys can start. Maybe more than 10 minutes.
I think what can be done in the meantime is exactly what we've been talking about, is we have to sometimes live things into being. And so when we stand up for what's right, when we stand up for the sovereignty in education, for those types of things, we continue to bring that with us wherever we go. When you go to the schools, when you go to school board meetings, when you go to those things, you stand up and be heard and recognized and say, I'm here, I'm watching. We are working on these things. These are things that we're doing, but we have to start walking it. We have to start living it. And I think that one of the greatest examples is the part that I had talked about earlier, is we're not in competition with each other. We are here to build each other up. And the thing that colonizers, when they came in, a lot of it was making us compete, making us fight. I mean, there were wars. I'm not going to go into that, but we all know that we are here together right now because all of us care. All of us are here because we care about what's happening. So the biggest thing we can do is live this into being, speak this into being, talk to everyone you know about it, get the word out there, learn as much as you can, and share what you learn. And stand with people like Misha in Juneau, and stand up next to her when she gets up and fights, because it's hard to do by yourself. And it's awesome when we do those things together.
About a week and a half ago, I was at a meeting at the Department of Education talking with a rather high official who was not aware of the 2007 UN Resolution on the Rights of Indigenous People and Articles 13, didn't even know it existed. So there is a need to educate people locally, especially in Juneau, the state capital, about legal documentation such as that. By the way, the United States was the last nation on earth to drop its opposition to the 2007 UN Resolution on the Rights of Indigenous People. Many people at the Department of Education are not even aware that the document exists. Another thing, in Juneau, Gold Belt Heritage, Douglas Indian Association has curriculum, and I'm sure Sealaska too, that has been developed for general use in the schools, and it's not used too much. Just creating that awareness, maybe asking teachers, are you using any of these units they have available? They have training available. Couple of small suggestions, but that's what I would add.
Are you sure you guys want this? Get your pens and papers out. Here we go. Gosh, I got to remember this is going to be recorded. My bad. So there are so many options, and I think the theme I'll focus on is redefining evaluation and success, right? And you don't need a legal document to do that. You don't need a legal document to hold your districts, your students' teachers, your niece and nephew themselves to those levels of accountability, right? And we need to have more accountability for each other, as Sonia said, to show up, to go in those schools, to go together into those schools, because we know those are hard places for us to be, right? If you are a confident person entering a school and you are sitting here right now, I charge you with finding 2 to 3 to 4 people, and over the course of this school year, getting in those schools. You do not need an invitation. This is local control. Take advantage of it. And start thinking and talking with your peers and your family and your children about how do you define success through education, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be in a school, but we need to redefine what that is, and we need to be ready to share that. And then what we really need to do is hold people accountable. We can start telling the local school district, we don't want to know about the deficits. We want to know how many people are identified in talented and gifted programs. We want to know what you're doing for them. We want to know the new curriculum you're going to create in those programs using those federal dollars. We want to know how your federal dollars are helping our students, right? I want to know what teachers need from me and how I define evaluation and success. Honest to goodness truth, every time I go into my children's school, it's how many hugs I get. It's how many waves I get. It's how many smiles I get. It's how many little cute these and how many kids I get in trouble because they get out of line. And then the teachers look and they're like, oh, it's Misha. It's so-and-so's mom. And they kind of do that look and then I'll, shoo the kids back into line, right? And it's how many teachers I get to talk to. It's how many teachers will wave, how many teachers will hug, how many teachers I have an inside joke with that shows I have a relationship with those teachers, even if they are not my children's teacher. The office staff, the principals, the administrators, it is all open to you, okay? Get in those doors. Help each other through those doors. Start redefining what we call success and get those hugs from those kids.
I think we have time for one last question, if there's one more.
Singai La, good morning, everybody. Good morning, panel. I am Harley Diva Holter. I'm from Heidelberg, Alaska, but I teach in KIC now, Ketchikan Indian Community. I'm their Haida linguist. And to answer the lady's question, I have a question of my own, but the best thing I've seen that makes a difference now, right now, is lifting each other up. And it starts at a very young age. So I became a teacher. I was not meant to be a teacher. I don't have a degree. I don't have a certificate of any kind. I was given the opportunity because I had knowledge that needed to be passed down. My boss here, Sonia Scan, if I could just talk with her real quick, she's given me the opportunity to do what that I think needs to be done while I'm teaching. Things like instilling pride within students was the biggest effort, because I had my first month back out of the United States Marine Corps. I heard from a student, we're not proud because we don't even know who we are. And so the biggest goal of mine as a teacher was to do that. And I tell you right now, lifting those kids up and letting them know that they have 30,000 years of excellence running through their veins, it brightens them up and it gives them the encouragement they need to move forward. So everything that these folks have talked about today has been 100% accurate in what I've just witnessed. And there's been changes. Me and my sisters get to go through the community of Ketchikan with a little bit of pushback every so often, but for the most part, we're welcomed with a warm invite. And for the question I have for the panel, when do you think it is that we'll have more support from our own people culturally? When do you think that will be the next big drive for us, is when we're not so much looking for the funding, or we're not so much pushing for these things? When do we get back to our ways of actually being? The best thing I ever got out of the United States Marine Corps is when somebody was in duress, mentally and physically, they asked them one thing, and it was their first question they ever asked. Can anybody in here guess what the United States military deemed the most important thing for your mental health? Your spiritual wellness. When they asked me that, it hit a chord, because I had been disassociated with our people for 4 years while I was away. And when I learned that, when I had that question faced with me, I started singing again. I started speaking again. And I know for a fact the way we heal is to go back and to be more a part of our people's ways. Is that something that we all deem important moving forward? How are in Deutschen?
Goodness, geez, Harley. I get to say I wasn't his official teacher, but... and I have high expectations, and he is definitely meeting them. So, Ganesh for those words. I will be honest, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you say, and that is the big dream. And it's something we really think about, because even when you just look at the data and the numbers right now, across the nation, we have BIE schools, we have private schools that are run by tribes or native entities, et cetera. We're still at 90+% in public schools, right? And in Juneau, we have the Tlingit Culture, Language, and Literacy Program. We have the Tlingit Hayukatangi Kudi, Tlingit Immersion Nest, right? the entire community is not knocking on the doors to get those seats. And it works for me because my children get those seats and we are reaping the benefits of it, right? But we have options now, but there is a barrier, right? There is a challenge that we have to bring to the table and have those conversations about. And I'm not gonna say, again, like compacting is the answer, but I do think that when you compare the fact that like the tribe is essentially a system placed on top of our clans, right? And we have the ability, we are the vehicle that can help bring that clan protocol, knowledge, expectation, conversation, collaboration into a system. I think once we get a chance to do it, the ideas are just going to be exponential, right? And then our clans and our people get to say, hey, you're not doing this. I want to come in and help you do that. That's what I think is going to be when it gets there. We have to quit doing you're doing this wrong, you're not doing this, you forgot about this. And I don't say that to cause harm. I say that in the sense that we are a people that have thrived on constructive criticism, right? But we also thrive because we solve problems and we are intelligent, we are passionate, and we are the most hardworking Southeast people you can find, right? I come from a family that worked in the canneries. Whew, there is nothing better, right? And so I really just feel like this is just that one vehicle that we can then say, okay, if we aren't doing that right, when can you come in and help us? Right? And then when can you come in and help us, Frida? And Paul, when can you come in and help us? And now we have a place full of cultural safety for our teachers, our children, our parents, our families, and our communities. And when we can control that space and make it culturally safe, I think we will be on that path. And that is the greater goal. So, geez, Harley.
Go ahead.
Please forgive me and my relatives. Just yeah, our language is very strong inside of me. That is why I speak the language at times. It is our strength. Telkwasiku wasa has achtatas to the tancha. I don't know really how others think about me in the school, but I know that door is wide open and I walk in like I'm just like everyone else with the teachers there. I don't look at myself any lower or any higher, but they're all welcoming me when I go into those schools. But I appreciate being in this meeting today, listening to you all speak, because you opened up an eye-opener for me of what am I doing, or what can I do, or how much more can I do to help our children feel comfortable in the school, and to also be educated and be aware that they are capable of learning just like anybody else. And they don't need to take any labels from other people, that they need to just stand strong and know that they have a strong mind because they come from people who've been struggling because of oppression for so long, and we're still here. And I just want to thank you for all that you've said. And I was sitting here, what can I learn here today that can help me? And you've helped me a great deal. And the questions I could ask the teachers, but now that I know that you've opened up a door for me to express my way of educating our children by allowing them to be themselves, allowing them to be who they can become. And I appreciated being able to work with Paul Berg and my son Joseph this summer, and using our cultural Raven stories to teach our children. And some people may not think, how can you use that as an educational process? But listening to Paul and my son, and then having to come up with a story that would match what they were talking about and give them encouragement that our people are very educated and very intelligent people. So thank you once again. Thank you for listening to me this morning.
So I just want to say again to the question, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? If we cannot work together, if we cannot stand together as one and support each other in everything, then it's going to be so much harder. I'm not going to say it's going to be impossible, but it's going to be really, really hard. Harder than it is now if we don't support each other. The biggest thing we need to do is to actually support each other. We are here. We are still here. That is what I keep hearing. We need to make sure that we tell that to each other. You're still here, and I'm happy you're here. And that's what we need to do, is build each other up. You're here. I'm happy you're here. We want to build each other up in such a way that wherever you go, you remember every ancestor I have prayed for me to go further. Everybody that's standing behind me is pushing me forward. And I'm going to grab as many people as I can along the way and push them forward. We want to be sure this happens. The only state right now that has education compacting with the state, I believe, is Washington. They have 5 schools. 4 of them are BIE schools. So there's only one tribally controlled school. And so we want to set a standard of what is right and what is good. And by setting that standard, we have to stand together as one and not as a separate bunch of parts. Thank you.
So I think we're going to wrap it up there. A huge round of applause for our panelists, please.